I'm here with my boy Albert J. Yancey. How you doing today?
I'm doing wonderful. How you doing, bro? This long and waited, anticipated interview with my boy, man, on the other side of the fence, man.
Give him a little background.
I met this young gentleman in the early 90s at what was known as the Terror Unit, and then it became the Pulaski Unit in 1999 when they decided to change the name because they brought death row over there. But just to give you a history between him and I, the same thing that you see him doing now and the same thing that I'm doing now, we collaborated while we was incarcerated about these days and realizing that to live on purpose outside of prison meant that we had to start living on purpose while we was in prison. So we used to do a bunch of rec yard services, tournaments, and just try to encourage the man right where we were. Unfortunately, he wasn't like me. He had to encourage me because I had 1 foot in and 1 foot out for a long time. And so as a result of that, eventually the Bible says that one plant won't water, but God gives the increase. And there were some years later that while I was sitting in the Lamesa unit, about 17 half hours away from my family, that I had that epiphany to where I was able to surrender everything. So just a brief history, we used to spread together. He used to try to play basketball. He's from Chicago, so he can't dribble and he's short. And we would just have fun. You know, we made where we were enjoyable for the moment, realizing that that was just a season of our life and it wasn't forever.
So that's his side. My side is the exact same, but I also would like to say when I was making a transition, because you have different custody levels in prison. And although we didn't have the same problems, I had problems myself. And as God blessed me to be able to overcome some of the personal things I had going on, Albert was a key in showing me how to, I don't want to say maneuver, but showing me how to be aware of my surroundings as God elevated me. One time we were passing out Christmas cards, and so he had invited me to what would be known as an administrative building. So there's windows and there's constantly people passing by. So I'm doing the cards, but people are passing by. So I look up to see, because if you have quick movement in prison, I'm just used to, okay, what's going on? So he told me, looked across from the table and said, you got to quit looking up. And I was like, what? And he was like, you can't be looking at everybody that comes by the window. And I took that exactly the way it was given to me, meaning there's no longer just bars in the outside, or there's no longer just concrete. There are windows and there are people on the other side of those windows. And so you need to behave in a manner that you are acclimated and used to people passing by. And he didn't say all that, but that's what I took from it. And that helped me. That same advice I was able to give some other men. And the reason I give you that background, and I might get the name wrong, Albert is constantly speaking about
post-incarceration syndrome.
Okay, post-incarceration syndrome. And so what I took away, even before that term was coined by him, was the fact that I've got to get used to living a better life outside of an illegal life. And then once I got used to that, God was like, hey, I need you to live a life beyond an ordinary life. In other words, live a supernatural life. And I can only do that through Christ Jesus. So Amen. Speaking of that,
post-incarceration syndrome, which is the acronym PIS, P-I-S.
Okay. And so we recently went to a prison to pass out some hygiene. And I had brought something up to Albert about the holidays. And he had basically said, hey, you know, I'm affected in some ways. And I said, I'm affected in some ways, but give me an example of what you're talking about. And what did you share?
I shared with Oliver when we was at the unit, one of the things that is not spoken of, it's like an elephant in the room, this post-incarceration syndrome. It's something that is not discussed, it's not shared, it's not talked about by many people. So while we was at the Lane Murray unit passing out toiletries to the women for the Christmas holiday, one of the things that I illustrated to the people is that unconsciously, when you go to prison, you disconnect emotionally. So things such as birthdays and New Year's and Christmas and Thanksgiving, et cetera, you disconnect emotionally from the psychological relationship that you would normally have with those days because you're trying to do your time. And what I mean doing your time is that if you recall that on December the 27th, which is my mother's birthday, if for 27 years, 5 months, and 1 day, I constantly reminded myself of December the 27th being my mother's birthday, then it opened the door for oppression, depression, and suppression to enter into me. And so the way to do my time, to be able to navigate through the jungle that we were in, was that you would have to disconnect. So it's not that I didn't love my mama, or it's not that men don't love their mothers or their children, et cetera, et cetera. The fact is that in order for me to make it through those hard times and those rough days, I have to disconnect emotionally. And in doing so, holidays are one of those days. The most celebrated holiday in prison, what would you think it is?
Well, we were Juneteenth.
Juneteenth was one of those days that we would all come together. But I'm gonna tell you the secret. The secret is the most celebrated holiday in prison is New Year's Day. And the reason why men will stay up all night, when that clock strikes 12, you will hear a lot of banging, you will see toilet paper being thrown around, et cetera, et cetera. And the reason why is because that man, that woman, or that child feels like they're 1 year closer to getting out.
Hallelujah.
So that New Year was a symbol of hope that I made it 365 days. And I'm just pressing forward every day, every day.
And on that note, something for me, I was working and my coworker asked me one time, not the current job that I have, but the job I first got when I was released. They stated, what do you do for fun? What's your leisure activity? And I was like, I study, I put together videos, I'm trying to learn, I'm trying to grow. And they were like, but what do you do for fun? And so when that individual asked me that, I went home and I thought about it and I was like, I'm really not enjoying life from a leisurely aspect. I'm being very intentional.
Yes.
I'm being very faithful to God, but that was a seed that was planted to help me understand that, look, you can do all the stuff that God is telling you to do, and you can work and do all that, but if you don't enjoy life, then you're going to look up and it's going to be time to die. And later on, I came in contact with a video from John Maxwell, and John Maxwell made a statement. He said, success is a journey, not a destination. And so what I took away from that, if I'm waiting to celebrate my life or live life until I acquire this or until I meet this individual, what about all the days, weeks, months, years up until that?
Yeah.
And so I believe that was because I was so driven for years. My closing remark on that is I went to a prison fellowship program and the director sat across from me and he said, man, you're going to be very successful when you leave. And I said, okay. He says, but if there's one thing that I could impart to you, learn how to let some other people do some things. And I said, what do you mean? I believe in empowerment. I believe in helping people to elevate. And he says, I'm not talking about that. You have been serving for over 25 years. Sometimes God just wants to use people to serve you.
Yes, most definitely.
And so I'm still learning that, but that's where I realized some of the effects that incarceration had on me.
And to put that in perspective of what you had to go through, you have to realize that for almost 28 years, you were independent. And so as a result of being incarcerated for the duration that you were, when we make the transition from incarceration to society, we are so programmed and disciplined to take care of our own. And so as a result of that, when people come around and they want to do and they want to give, we're reluctant because you're taught when you go into prison, don't accept nothing. So as a result, unconsciously, you've adopted that as a behavior. And this is something that needs to be discussed. And when you talked about hobby, I've been home almost 3 years now. Next month will be 3 years. I just now realized that I was like you. I didn't have a hobby. And as a result of that, I told myself that in order to live the abundant life that Christ talks about, that you have to have a balance.
That's right.
You can't be work driven. You can't be church driven. You have to have a balance. And we have to realize that even a hot water heater, it has a pressure valve. Men and women and children, we need something that takes us away from our normal activity. So I told myself, I'm gonna take up bowling this year. I'm gonna take up bowling.
Right,
I'm gonna take up bowling. That's gonna be my
fun.
hobby.
It's fun. It can be frustrating,
But that's
Come
okay.
on.
That's okay.
Okay.
That's okay.
Have you bowled?
Yes, I went with the Fountain of Praise for
Okay.
our White Elephant Christmas party,
Yes.
which is the prison ministry that I partake in and go back inside the male and female prisons in Texas. And this was my first time ever bowling. But do you know what? I had more strikes than everybody. So I don't know if it's called beginner's luck
Athleticism.
or if it's called because I'm an athlete and I just can gravitate towards excellence, and I'm a competitor. So as a result of that, I said that this year I'm gonna try to take up some bowling.
Okay. And I know you'll do well. Whatever you put your mind to, I know you'll do well. I want to talk to you on a range of subjects.
Okay, most definitely.
First, when I look at YouTube, I'm looking at a bunch of men sharing about events that take place in prison.
Absolutely.
And I can only speak for the ones that I've seen. The ones that I have seen have not glorified prison life and actually have always, no matter what the story was, said, you don't want to go there.
Absolutely.
And so what I have not seen is someone who's doing a YouTube per se prison show. I mean, I'm telling you about the experience in prison where they speak about God.
Amen.
They speak about rape, speak about extortion, speak about womanizing, and you and I sort of talked about that. And I don't have a question, but what are your thoughts? Because what he and I constantly share is people beyond prison also need to see other sides of prison. And what that looks like is we had gone to Houston a few months ago.
Absolutely.
And what happened, men who had been into all kind of wrongdoing in prison, we were out at dinner and everybody there is doing legally responsible jobs that are serving the community or helping their family. And we always say people need to see that.
Absolutely. And that is the foundation of my ministry, Faith Beyond Incarceration. And the reason
Faith Beyond Incarceration. But when we go to
FBI.
FBI. So imagine a man in prison saying, my prison ministry is FBI. Imagine what we get.
And that's the response that I want to get, because there's such a negative connotation with acronym. But one thing that I've learned how to do is to flip the script. So what God gave me when I got out of prison, he showed me the illustration of how men and women and our teenagers, I don't want to exclude them. We have to realize that there's a lot of teenagers who are considered to be at-risk teens who are incarcerated. But what God showed me while I was there is that we rely on God for everything. We rely on God for commissary. We rely on God to take care of our families. We rely on God to grant us parole, that favor be shown. If I've got a headache, I can lay my hand on my head. If the elders of the church are there, they come. Faith is so important in a prison setting. But what happens is when they make the transition from incarceration to society, they begin to look at the circumstances around them. And as a result, just like Peter, he began to sink because of the circumstances. Jesus had already beckoned him to come out onto the water. And he took the initial steps, just like the men, women, and children who are incarcerated. They take the initial steps in the beginning. But once they transition and they've been granted parole and they out here and they are rejected for an apartment, they're rejected for a job, they're rejected by family members and communities. And let's be true, I have to be 100. A lot of churches will reject the men and women who are coming from prison. But what I've had to realize and what I promote is the same God that grows the trees on the outside of the prison The same God that makes the grass green on the outside of the prison is the same God inside of prison. And had it not been for my relationship and my encounter with different brothers and sisters who was coming in and out of prison, then I don't know how I would have been sane for almost 28 years. Because you have to realize that me and Oliver can play basketball today. We can go lift weights. We can even work in the same location. But how would you feel if you witnessed that individual who was normal today, tomorrow they're eating their own feces, or they're trying to cut their wrists, or they're trying to hang themselves? So it was only by the grace of God that I was able, and Sean Oliver was able, to exit prison and still have your mind. Your mind.
You're right. And when you say that, because I want to be clear, a lot of what I'm hearing on YouTube channels is true, but what I pray is highlighted. There's also some things going on behind bars that are building men up.
Absolutely.
For beyond prison. And when he speaks about rec yards, meaning outside of what the chaplaincy or the administration put together, we and other men put together services where men, if they didn't want to play basketball or handball or do whatever, they could come over there. And there are a lot of people in different organizations and groups that they want change, but no one wants to be patient enough with them for change. And my example is this: people, if you accuse somebody of something, like say I accuse you of being a liar,
Absolutely.
but you're not a liar,
Okay.
and I say, man, I know you told that lie, and people argue, I didn't do that, so you shouldn't hold me accountable for that. I'm not speaking about that.
Okay.
I'm speaking about people who are liars, who are perverts, who are arrogant. Why can't we have a mindset that if you are all the things that I heard you were, and if you've done everything that I heard that you did, we still have to have a mindset that they can change?
Absolutely.
Because when I look in the mirror, my family believed in me, but even where I'll say, well, man, that's impossible. That's impossible for me to sleep with one woman. That's impossible for me to not love money more than anything. God came into my life, and where I used to love money, I love people.
Amen.
Where I used to believe, well, I can't have one woman, I gotta have more than one woman. I'm celibate right now, waiting on my one woman. And I'm saying all of that to say that those kinds of dispositions and beliefs were formulated behind bars, and I and Yancey are not unique in the fact that God is doing great things behind prison walls. And as people come out of prison, if they didn't do the things you wanted them to do, if they don't do the things they said they're gonna do, you and I still have a responsibility to do what we're supposed to do towards them, to put them in a position of success. Now, whether they achieve that or even want that, that's on them. And that's one thing I really want to stress. People are always saying, well, people are this or people are that. And the opposite is, well, I'm not that, I'm not this. I'm telling you, when people are low down and dirty, they still have value. And that value is not going to be seen overnight. And so I'm encouraging everyone that's watching this. I'm not telling you trust every individual that gets out of prison.
That's right.
What I am saying is trust as much as God or your intuition or your convictions allow you to, and give them that. Don't make yourself have to give people something you never wanted to give, because if it goes wrong or bad, you're going to hold it against them. But if you just give people what you're comfortable giving them, and we all should be comfortable giving one another something, because we all have needs.
Absolutely.
To the Christian, I'm appealing, if you believe the Bible, then the Bible tells us it's better to give than receive. But if you're not a Christian, know that you're going to need help sometimes. So just provide people help, not just who are coming from behind the walls, but people who are free. And that's one reason when we have dialogue, we always were like, God, give us a chance. We're blooming where we're planted, but give us a chance beyond, so that we can help men who come behind us, but also people who've never been incarcerated, there are some mindsets and some standard operating procedures that go on in this world that is just not right, whether you believe in God or not.
That's right. And to piggyback on what he was saying, one of the things that Jesus was always able to do, he was able to see the good and the bad. And that's what we have to do, because there's a lot of people who will be judgmental on people who make mistakes. The majority of the people in prison are not bad people per se. We made bad choices. And as a result of that, we've been ostracized and X'd out as unredeemable. But from Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, there's no one who had an encounter with Jesus who remained the same. And so if we want people to accept us in the areas that we're broken, we're hurt, we're damaged, we're torn down, depressed, oppressed, then why not extend that same openness to someone else? Regardless of where they're at now, we have to realize that if we will just to really examine the people who society deems as being problematic, problem makers, then we would have to realize that we all fitted in that category at one point. And so mercy has to be extended where society says it shouldn't. And so what has happened is that when men and women are exiting prison, we need to be there for them. I can't tell you where I would be had I not had people step into my life when I exited prison and was there for me. I mean, a lot of times I'll be driving down the highway and wonder, how would I even know how to read a navigation system when I've been incarcerated for almost 28 years? Going to Walmart to a self-checkout counter. These things were not even thought of when I went to prison. So the men and women who are exiting and those who are caught up in lifestyles and behavior that's contrary to not only the laws of the land, but the spiritual laws, which is the Holy Bible. I want to make that clear. The Bible. That's contrary to that. We have to be open and receive these people the same way that we want people to receive us when they find us in our mess.
So, 2022, what are some things that you are involved in or hope to accomplish in 2022?
Well, one of the things that I'm really narrowing in on, I have to finish my book. So many people have been asking me about releasing my book. But one of the things that I had to learn is that I can't release the book when people want me to release the book, because it would be prematurely.
That's right.
And as a result of that, the whole story in its totality of what God has done, and still yet to do in my life will be left out. So I've been putting some time aside and wanting to get my book developed. I'm also wanting to expand my business. God allowed me to start my own business called Ebony and Ivory Expediter LLC in August of 2021. And what I want to do is I want to be able to have a platform for men and women who are coming home, who all you need is your basic driver's license to start your own business. So this is one of the things that I want to do, and then also become more involved in the prison ministry. And what I mean by that is that there's some units that's not being tapped into, especially with the younger generation, the 14, 15, 16-year-old kids that have been certified to stand trial as an adult and they're serving adult sentences. These people need to realize that you don't have to do your time the hard way. And so I want to start going into some of those places. So as God opened up doors for me, I just want to be prepared. And so I remember a quote, you said John Maxwell, and there was a quote that Oprah Winfrey once said. And she said that preparation plus opportunity, let me say that again, excuse me. Preparation plus opportunity equals success. So in prison, I had adopted this mentality that I live by the 5 P's. Proper preparation prevents poor performance. And so what I began to do is prepare while I was incarcerated for when I was out. I created me a vision book. And a lot of times I will refer back to that book just to see if those things are the same. Of course, a lot of things have been changed because of exposure. And what I mean by exposure, for 27 years, 5 months, and 1 day, my exposure was the television and magazines. And so therefore I was limited on my scope of what life is really about. So I could cut out a house, I could cut out a car, but there's so much more when you exit prison that you add to your vision. You don't subtract the vision that you had while you was incarcerated, you just add to it. And so that's what I'm doing now, is I'm adding to that vision that I had while I was incarcerated to create a lifestyle for me to show people that it's not about your mistakes, it's not about where you start, but it's about where you end up at.
Very proud of you, very proud of you. Before we end, do you have any questions for me?
The question that I have for Mr. Sean Oliver, AKA Safe Prison.
They don't know what that is. They
don't
know.
Well, one day he need to do a video on that.
Hey, this man, I'm not even going to tell you about that right now.
But one of the questions that I would have for Mr. Sean Oliver is, since you've made the transition to society, what has been one of the hardest things that you've had to deal with?
Understanding that I cannot help everybody like in prison.
Okay.
The world is too big and there are too many needs. On a compound, the compound I was at, basically 3,000 under, God in me, I can help anybody. So making the adjustment to know, okay, God, is this a door? Is this an individual that I'm to commit time and resources to? Or is that to be used here? Or is it both? And so that has been one of the most difficult things. The next most difficult thing has been convincing people who are on roads like I was on that, bro, you're not gonna like the ending. I work for a non-for-profit called Jail to Jobs. We deal with at-risk youth. And so generally when I first meet an individual, normally their age is 15 to 25. There's already an age difference. But then when I begin to talk to them and they snap like, okay, you understand what I'm talking about. I understand, but there's a better way. And a lot of times people don't believe that there's a better way. Because I give you this example. If a man just was drafted into the NFL this year and he met Tom Brady and he said, Tom Brady, you won this many Super Bowls. Man, I know that's the greatest feeling in your life. And Tom Brady might look at him and say, that's not the greatest feeling in my life. I understand why you feel that way, but the greatest feeling in my life is being a dad and being a successful husband. Well, that football player will say, well, no, you only feel that way because you won the Super Bowl. And there are different youngsters that'll tell me, you only feel that way because you got older. And I'm saying, no. What I'm telling you is I'm able to look back and see that what I once thought was valuable had that much value as opposed to things that I see having this much value. And I care about people. I don't do anything haphazardly, and I don't do anything that I'm not striving to see the effects of it for the glory of God. And that has been very difficult to overcome some of the mindsets of some of the youngsters. Not that I'm trying to overcome them to get them to think like me, but I'm trying to, through my testimony, allow them to expand what they're considering. Okay, you say this, this, and this is what you want to do. Let me tell you this, this, and this, just hoping that your perspective grows. And out of your perspective growing, maybe you won't make the decision that'll land you 27 years for me. How many for you?
27 years.
10 months for me. How many for you?
5 months.
16 days for me. How many for you?
1 day.
See, that's what doing all that time will do. It can cause you to be better. It can cause you to think. But these 27 years, what if we would have listened to the people who were mentoring us? And that's one of the difficulties that I have, just being patient, because I can't see for them. I can see where they're going, but I can't see for them. And so just being patient and continuing to have faith that they'll see it, and hoping that if they don't, God have mercy on them.
Oh, mercy. And that's one of the things, as far as because we're people. we love to encourage, we love to exhort, and we like to be able to look at an individual and see the good in them, even when they don't see it for themselves. But one of the things that God had to show me, when you're dealing with a lot of ex-offenders, there's a lot of disappointment there, because I can want the best for someone, but until they get it into, this is the terminology that I use, they have to get it out of they want to and into they have to. In other words, I don't wake up in the morning and want some oxygen. If I want to live, I have to have some oxygen. So a person's goals, desires, it has to be an exchange from your want to a have to. And when they get it into they have to, then they will be able to see their lives make the type of change that is necessary. But because we're people, we want to see the best in people. The disappointing factor is when I get a letter or I get a phone call from a family member and that man or that woman or that child has reoffended, relapsed, and back in prison when they had an opportunity. But what God showed me is that there's two types of people that we have to deal with. It's those that we have to let go and those that we can guide. God is the same way. We willfully come to him. We're not a robot. So he either allows us to go with him or to grow apart from him. And that's what I had to learn as well.
When you said that, maybe there's somebody watching and you're telling some individuals good things for them. You know they are good things for them. And it's like, man, they don't want to listen. They won't receive it. I want to encourage you that I was speaking to a defense attorney the other week. And she said, I'm trying to think like my clients. And I said, listen, you don't need to think like your clients. I was formerly one of your clients, not that particular individual, but I said this. If you are a giraffe, I said, picture yourself as a giraffe. And if I'm a mouse, on my best day, standing on 2 flat feet on the same level ground as you, how far can I see? And she was like, not that far. What if I want to see like you see, but I'm on the ground the same level as you? She said, well, you can't. I said, that's the problem. A lot of people trying to help people who have criminal justice involvement are trying to put themselves in the mindset of, well, I need to understand you. When in reality, if you've been married for so-and-so years, have been faithful to your wife, but I've done nothing but cheat on women, who really needs to understand each other? If you've never stolen, robbed, or assaulted anyone, but I have, do I need to elevate my mindset or do you need to lower your mindset? And my closing comment to her was this: never let you feeling inadequate because you haven't gone through or seen what that individual has seen or gone through make you feel like the wisdom that you are sharing with them is for naught. Because all the things that my mother, grandmother, lawyer, friends, and other family members told me that I ignored, overlooked, or didn't pay attention to, when I developed that, I have to have a better life mindset. All those things began to benefit me. So if you're there, never let your voice be silenced to a relative, to a friend, to a stranger. who you meet in a different place, because the wisdom that you're sharing, if it is right, if that individual ever decides to make a change, then that wisdom will do them some good. And if there's somebody looking, they say, well, no, they can't tell me nothing because they ain't been through nothing. All I want you to think about is all you know is going through something. And the people you know all been through something. And I'm not discounting experience, but I'm saying also there is some validity to the fact that since they have not made the mistakes that we've made, since they have not been through what we've been through, there's some things we can learn from them and vice versa.
That's right.
Anything else you want to share?
And I just thank you for tuning in. Hopefully it was something that was shared from my heart and showing all of our heart that connects with your heart. Understand that we've proven that we can do time. Now we've proven that we are doing freedom. It's not that we're free. The rec yard is a lot bigger out here. I have the opportunity to go to the movies, to go to church, to go to the strip clubs, or to go in places where I shouldn't be. While I was in prison, I was limited. I can only lift weights, play basketball, handball, run around a track, or throw some horseshoes. We're free, but we're not free. The rec yard is bigger. So the same things that we had to do in there to get out of prison, we're doing them out here, and that's making wise choices. We love you. Continue to pray for us, and we hope that there's something that was shared that has impacted your life for today to make you a better person.
God bless you.